The nature of work is changing. Our professional lives are being turned upside down by technology and by the competitiveness of globalization. So suddenly we have amazing spaces like this where people come to collaborate, hundreds of companies put under one roof. That also has us thinking differently about our well-being and our health as we try to separate what we do at work from everything else. And Henry Albrecht, you're the CEO and founder of Limeade, and you specialize in this kind of thing, well-being and business performance. When you look at a spot like this, what does that say to you?
Well, I love how intentional this space is about the high energy and high stress life of entrepreneurship. But as companies grow, the seed is being set right now of where well-being fits in that work equation. So I hope that these entrepreneurs here think about the role well-being is going to play in their workplace as they build great companies.
And so if we've got a CEO with one person off, is it okay for him or her to actually start doing jumping jacks here in the middle of the day?
Jumping jacks, walking meetings, little basketball, anything to de-stress and focus on the sustainable greatness of what they're trying to do.
Well, I look forward to learning more. Let's head on downstairs.
Let's do it.
All right.
Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm glad you decided to join us. I think this is a really important conversation we're about to have. This notion of well-being in the workplace is seemingly hitting critical mass here, especially in the Pacific Northwest. With Amazon and that big expose by the New York Times, which ended up being the most commented on article for the NewYorkTimes.com in the history of that site, is just indicative of how people are thinking and worrying about well-being in the workplace, especially in professional settings. Meanwhile, you have companies like Starbucks here in the Pacific Northwest that think about their employees as partners and seem to focus more on them than they do on customers. So you have these really interesting conversations going on. And what I love most about our guest today is that Henry Albrecht has been thinking about this for a long time as well. He started Limeade in 2006. He's a real thought leader in terms of tying and the correlation between an employee's well-being and business performance. In fact, Henry has this really great quote that he said recently, that work is where most people get the real meaning in their lives. What you do in your work and what you decide to do should be very aligned with what you are about as a human being. I think that's a really powerful thing to say, and that very much gets to the core of what Limeade is trying to do. I think very much what their business model is about is the future of what we'll be doing in work, if things do go well for us. There's another alternative as well that I want to discuss with him. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome the CEO of Limeade, Henry Albrecht, up to the stage. Henry. Thank you. Welcome. So, welcome, Henry.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
You know, Limeade and your life for the last almost 10 years is very much focused on this notion of well-being in the workplace. What do you mean by well-being, and why do we care about that in the workplace?
Yes, well, well-being is, when we started the company, we said, how do you measure well-being? What is it? And we searched the world for definitions that we found statistically valid and acceptable and evidence-based, and really it wasn't a thing back then. Now we read a lot about mindfulness and resilience and all of these elements of well-being, but there was a rich science behind it in sociology, in medicine, in a lot of the sciences about what drives sustainable well-being. And so we created a model, and it includes a whole bunch of different components, including stress and nutrition, exercise, meaning, purpose, relationships with others, your work life, your home life. And we just called it the well-being assessment that we created.
Isn't that the stuff we normally relegate or delegate to the evenings and mornings with our families, and work is about getting work done? Why do we care? Why should we care?
Yeah, I think the quote you said sums it up. We don't really believe in the dichotomy of work and life. It's not, we think you should bring your whole self to work, and you're still thinking about work at home, and that's okay. It's a natural thing to not have this bizarre separation at the end of the workday between thinking about work and thinking about family. So we just blur the lines a little bit.
So how healthy is that blurring of the lines? I mean, historically and traditionally, we've been taught that when our workday comes to an end, and I think the Europeans believe this especially, you go home and you put your work behind you. Like a company like Volkswagen, for example, has prohibited their employees from using email on weekends and evenings. So when you're talking about the blurring of the lines, is this a phenomenon that just is happening anyway and we have to manage it differently?
I think so. I mean, to me, it's all around true employee engagement. When people feel that they just care about what they're doing and they're passionate about it. And it's not just startups and entrepreneurs that feel that. It's nurses and physicians and line workers and salespeople that if they really feel connected to their work and it's a big part of their life, then turning it off seems unnatural to me. I think setting boundaries is great because you can't sustain energy and engagement over a long period of time if you're stressed about work all the time.
And how much of this, you said turning it off, how much of this is related to the new technologies that we all seem to be using all the time now?
Yeah, I mean, to us, we've initiated what we call challenges for our employers, things like turn off the tech, where we literally turn off all the technology in your life for a few hours and walk in the woods, or have a team meeting where there are no computers involved and there's nothing except maybe a conversation, a face-to-face. So there are limits to it, but we also find technology is a great enabler of this type of solution because it allows scale of communication about things like values and culture that didn't really exist before the connected workplace. So having social media and social connections of people from Texas and California and Florida all in the same thing, maybe around a health and wellness activity or a mindfulness exercise, really connects the culture in ways that weren't possible before.
So you're a Seattle boy. You're a big Seattle boy. You used to play basketball. You worked in the .com era. You worked at Intuit. You started this company in 2006. Obviously, it's a business, but it clearly means something to you as well. What has really motivated you to get into this space?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of the things in my background. I have a little economic consulting, so I like to follow the money and see how the incentives are aligned or not aligned in companies. I'm a big team sports fan. I think the power of teamwork and hard work and collaboration and hustle should be at the core of any great company. And then I also, as a former English major, I think being able to articulate and tell a story to your workers, to your employees, about why this is important is an important thing. My life at Intuit showed me that you can have a really intentional, great culture where it's okay to work hard, but also bring your whole self to work. They had great policies for maternity leave and parental leaves of all kinds. They had outdoor walking paths near their corporate offices where it really got me thinking about how you could have an intense, high-performing company and still recognize that people need breaks to have a sustainable life.
And these things are all important, even as we're seeing that competition and business performance have gotten so elevated that you have exposés such as what we've seen with the New York Times and Amazon, where companies are being criticized for overdoing it with their employees. So how do you balance what seems to be two parallel phenomenons right now? This notion is that we have to compete with the world and we have to be on all the time, but we have to think about our well-being of our employees as well.
I think Amazon did us all a big favor by putting this topic in the spotlight. And I think they're actually having discussions themselves inside their company, maybe that they have to have now because it's affecting their commerce and their business that they weren't having before. So I think it's a great conversation to have. I think just enabling people at work to have discussions about their well-being. We actually encourage all of our managers in our one-on-one weekly meetings with our employees to say it's okay to talk about well-being. Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? Are you taking care of yourself? Without being intrusive. And so to me, having the discussion, making yourself a little bit uncomfortable around the discussion is good. And then ultimately, the strategy of the business has to align with how you think about health and wellness and well-being more broadly. If you have the type of company where it's not okay to take a break ever, where the policies and the physical environment and the leadership basically says, put up or shut up, I think a lot of today's workforce, not just women of childbearing age or millennials, but everyone is saying, I don't need to work at a company that doesn't recognize who I am. I give my all to this company, and all I ask for in return is to treat me like a human being.
So if we're looking specifically at what you advise your clients to do in terms of implementing well-being in the workday, what are you looking at?
Well, first of all, it starts at the top. I think one of the comments Zach made earlier about culture was it's really hard to shift a culture after the fact. We talk about cultures happen, Cultures exist whether you're intentional about them or not. So to me, the first and foremost thing is to have leaders who are very intentional about what they want from that culture. That saves everybody a lot of trouble up front because you can self-select in or out of that culture. We read a lot about Amazon, but I think about the Navy SEALs. How many people want to sign up to be thrown into the mud in ice-cold weather and marched until they collapse? Some people do, actually. Some people say, that's for me, I want that. And that's okay. So being intentional allows people to self-select in or out of that culture.
So you're saying it's okay if Amazon has these policies as long as you know what you're getting into ahead of time and you're actually comfortable with that culture?
I'm not sure I would be the guy up here to say Jeff Bezos doesn't know what he's doing. That would be a level of hubris that even I don't aspire to.
Broad shoulders, you
I
can take
think, I think that their business is in retail. They compete with Walmart. They compete with Target. They also compete with all the hosting companies in the world, and they're a great tech company. I think in low-margin retail businesses, that tends to be how that whole industry is structured. And I think there are alternatives to that if you don't do that. So I think their business strategy and their culture are probably more aligned than they get credit for. That said, our belief is that companies who want to have a sustainable workforce where it's okay to take care of yourself tend to be higher performing over time. The stock returns of companies who are very intentional about culture, including health and well-being as part of that, tend to outperform the S&P.
And I actually think you're onto something. And I'll say one last thing about Amazon is I have a number of students who have graduated from the program that I'm at the University of Washington who work there and are quite happy, but they know what they're getting. What's interesting to me about that article is that it was so commented upon because I think it's indicative that people are worried that this is the future of white-collar work. And so when you have a company like Limeade saying, no, we can actually look at this differently and we can help you lead differently within your companies, I think that brings a certain amount of relief that this is the new reality, not the Amazon reality. Like that's the Navy SEALs if you want it, but we can have something more comfortable.
That's right, and I think there's a fine line. I think maybe it changes during different stages of your life. But what we've learned in 10 years of studying this problem, this challenge of sustainable well-being in the workplace, is that first of all, people weren't ready for that discussion 10 years ago. We were knocking on doors and not getting a lot of replies, and that discussion is fully ready to be had.
Why now?
I think the time is ready. I don't really know actually. I think the downturn in the economy in 2008 through 2010 had people in retrenchment mode, and I think people have said if we're going to rebuild this economy, let's do it with more purpose this time. That's my macroeconomic view.
So some of your clients include the state of Washington, Puget Sound Energy, the North Face. Can you just maybe choose one of them and say, what are you doing specifically for them to help them think differently about well-being and tie it to their performance?
Yeah, so the parent company of North Face is a company called VF Corp. They're also a retailer, and they're really about their brands. They have outdoor brands, they have aspirational brands. So tying in health and wellness programs to the way they actually talk about their commercial business, that's the type of strategic connection we're looking for. We have a local customer called Bloodworks Northwest, formerly Puget Sound Blood Center, who actually, their CEO had the courage to speak publicly about his own health issues, his own biometrics, publicly in front of the whole company, and got his whole leadership team, each one sponsored an initiative or challenge for all their workforce. So having that type of leadership support, putting financial incentives behind it, has led to things like 15% fewer sick days at that company, flat health costs for the last 3 full years with no changes to their benefits. So companies are saying they're saving millions of dollars. At the same time, they're getting a little more tight alignment with their workforce.
So what are you telling these companies? Are you just saying, hey, just take 10 minutes and do yoga in the middle of the office? Or is there a really programmatic approach to here is a schedule of things that you should do, here are your targets, and here's how you know you're doing better?
Yeah, it's really a little bit of both. So we have something called the Limeade Fundamentals, which is basically eat, move, sleep, and think about stress in different ways. But then if you can get something that's really culturally relevant, that fits with that business, that's what actually makes it really connect with the culture. We serve a lot of big health systems and home healthcare companies where it's just a really stressful, not always super high-paying job. And sometimes it is as simple as saying, take 10 minutes for yourself. give the caregiver the permission to take care of him or herself for a few minutes and make it something the company says is okay, that can go a long way. So it can be super simple and local and culturally relevant. It could also just be the basics of, here's what's healthy and not healthy to eat. Here are the things we're going to buy for the fridge at the office and not buy. You know, are we ordering pizzas when we buy lunch for the company, or are we doing something different? So those types of decisions, every single one of them sends a message, and that's how brands are built as an employer brand.
So I just want to tell folks that I biked out to Henry's office last week to visit it and get a sense of the culture, and I was told by one of his colleagues that once one of their clients sent donuts as a thank you, and Henry went ballistic. No donuts in the office, huh?
I get a little weird about that stuff. I know the team in the back is laughing. You know, if anyone wants to send us a gift, we love fresh fruits and vegetables. Water's delicious, but you can take it too far. I mean, if you want to be taken seriously by your workforce, you have to kind of meet them where they are now, and sometimes those changes have to be small and subtle to get change to happen. It doesn't happen overnight. Cultures develop over time with intentionality, and they're also not reinvented instantly. But that said, I don't think you'll find anything unhealthy in our office.
So tell me a little bit about the Limeade platform. How do you actually motivate your clients and their employees to actually fall in line with this program? Is it just, here's a bunch of posters and this is what you're supposed to do? Or what are they doing to change their behavior?
Yeah, a big part of it is connecting people. So the social aspect of health and wellness is huge. We also provide game-like elements of rewards and surprises
so they have
to
an
people.
App on their phone, right?
Yeah, they do.
I know that folks can't necessarily see, but maybe you could walk us through a little bit.
Yeah, I'll show you one that is a very recent example. So this is the leaderboard from a challenge we just completed called Mad Steps with Henry. So this is a way to send a message to the workforce that it's okay to have a one-on-one meeting where you're walking outside the office. In fact, we tracked steps for a month. You can see the leaderboard here. I'll share my position on this. My goal was to get over 100 people in the company to engage in this. We got 120. And my personal goal was to be in the top 10 because I'm a competitive guy and I wanted to be in the top 10. And I knew I wasn't going to win because we have all these triathletes and marathoners. So someone I sit right next to who shows up as number 6 here on the leaderboard took me up. She's about as competitive as I am. Perhaps more, we'll learn in a second. So I finished 11th. I didn't make it. She stopped driving to work to beat me on this. She lives 4.5 miles from our office. And she started walking to work every day, 9 miles of walking. The challenge ended last week, and she's still walking to work. So to me, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Top-down, company-level support to say this is something we care about. Allegedly, this challenge inspired her to do something different in her life, one small change. And then in return, she's inspiring me because now, first of all, I'm not going to lose to her next time. Second of all, you know, she's showed me what's possible with this. And the next thing we do, it's not just about physical exercise. It's about all the activities that reinforce our culture. So it might be something like getting a biometric screening, getting your preventive care, even things like giving thanks to your interns or learning about new topics. So we make gratitude and social connection really a core part of our
So a lot of this is obviously tracked through an app. The steps, I imagine, come through a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or something like that. So it's not like you're reporting that you took the 20,000 steps because you counted every step. There's a lot of technology involved with this.
You know, I told myself I'd never quote George Bush in public, but trust but verify is what some companies do. So we support about 100 different apps and devices that can also feed into some of these exercise challenges. And the company gets to decide if it's only the devices that they trust or whether they trust their workforce. Our best practice is actually to allow people to self-report on top of the data. This makes it easier, but if their battery runs dead and they just did a 10K, we think it's okay to add the data. But that's an employer-by-employer decision.
So the obvious question to all of this is, if this is the future of employee-employer relationship in terms of thinking about well-being, is that you've got technology, you've got self-reporting, you've got a lot of personal, private information going into this. Is there a situation 10 years down the road where an employee's health benefits will be better or worse if we're tracking their sleep and their obesity and everything else, and then it's not hitting those targets?
Yeah, I think anytime you're saying that you're trying to blur the lines between work life and home life, and the company is paying you $10,000 a year for your insurance, that's going to be privacy, and how intrusive a company can be is going to be a rich discussion. For us, it's really simple. It's the employers who use our product are telling their workforce, we genuinely care about your well-being. We want you to be healthy. We won't see your personally identifiable information ever. And we want to reward people who do the things we think are important to our culture. So to us, it's a very simple statement. And employees can opt in or opt out of that, and they might get more or less reward because of it. We feel like not only is that fair, but it's really the best way to build a good company. What we've found is that companies who say that statement to their workforce, invest in that statement, say, we really care about your well-being, their workforce is 38% more engaged, 10 times less hostile, less likely to be hostile towards their employer. And then there's employee turnover is 17% lower, and a whole bunch of other things that are measurable business impacts of this type of program. In addition to the stock returns we talked about earlier.
So that's really interesting, because you're actually asking these clients, these companies, to manage a cultural shift within the organization. And when you come into a client for the first time, and basically you have 100 questions that each employee's got to answer, how do you establish your credibility in saying, trust us, we know what we're talking about, and this is going to be great for you. And even if you don't feel comfortable about this, 3 months from now, you're all going to be competing with each other. You're going to love it.
Yeah, well, our best salespeople are our customers who have said publicly that they're doing it, it's working great, it's reinforcing our culture, and we're saving $5 million. So one of our customers is Cincinnati Children's Hospital, the #3 ranked children's hospital in the country, and they've said that publicly. And their CEO has led zoo walks. Cincinnati is famous for their zoo. Zoo walks with Michael is a challenge they've done where he's actually led monthly walks, like the Pied Piper, I suppose, although that's maybe not the right metaphor, around the zoo. And that's basically publicly saying this is the way to do it. So the first and best testimonial comes from the customer, but also there's a lot of rich science in this too. So we have behavioral science experts, medical experts, others who are saying there's so much science to be applied here, but don't make it look scientific or hard. Make it fun, make it simple, help people make small steps, reinforce those steps with peer support and little surprises and rewards. All of that is just stolen from the annals of behavior change science.
You mentioned that 10 years ago when you were knocking on doors that nobody really wanted to give you the time of day about this, and it probably felt like science fiction back then, right? And now we're talking about this as the quantified self, that all of a sudden everything we do in our lives, home or work, can be tracked. We will change our behavior based on what that data tells us. So that's really exciting. It's also a little scary. Where do you see your business going? Because this seems to be where we're heading with society and our technology.
Yeah, well, first of all, we hope to continue growing. We think that this discussion, while it's happening in these impactful sessions like this, where people are self-selecting into it, they're starting to happen in the C-suite of companies. We're actually starting to see the silos break down, where human resources and human capital management is viewed as a truly strategic function now. And they have, chief human resource officer has a seat at the table with the CEO that they didn't have before. So those discussions are happening. Huge amount of technological innovation, both at Limeade, who we view ourselves as a leader, obviously, but with Fitbit and Nike Plus and all of the amazing ways to track. And I think we have to keep in mind that personal choice will always play a role in your well-being. And it's okay to turn off technology. The ideal interaction for us is mostly transient and passive, and we're the technology that makes it really easy and fun to connect, but not a bunch of hurdles that employees have to jump through.
Yeah, it's amazing, because even 2 years ago, we weren't talking about wearables, and even the Apple Watch is seen as still very nascent. And so a lot of what you're hoping to hinge your business on, and you are, is based on technology that hasn't quite hit critical mass in terms of adoption, nor have we actually asked the tough questions of this technology in terms of who owns this data, what are the real implications for us. So it must be interesting that you are actually a little bit ahead of the curve, trying to push a culture and a technology that hasn't quite hit it there with the average person.
Yeah, that's right. It's fascinating how fast technology moves. When we were supporting multiple devices 4 years ago, no one else was doing that. So we like to think we were pioneering, but it's great now to see well-being as a topic of discussion in companies. And it's so multidisciplinary. We were talking about universities where if you want to be in health and well-being, you could be in economics, statistics, engineering, biology, chemistry, math, social sciences, medicine. Almost every single major can fuel into human well-being. I think there are no more oil and gas and industrial type revolutions coming. And the next revolution for the workplace, I think, is to think about meaning and purpose and health and well-being.
That's amazing. That's a really incredible shift that we're seeing. I mean, the Industrial Revolution was really just get the work done, clock in, clock out, make something, and you're done. I mean, you're part of the machinery. And now it's really about existentially, where do I fit into the professional world, into this company? Do I believe in it? Is it part of my passion? Is it part of my motivation? That's a much bigger palette to play with.
Yeah, last week, the CEO of our mega software firm out in Redmond was quoted as saying that his main job, his primary role in the company, is a curator of culture. And I don't think you would have heard that a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. The science of this is becoming mainstream, and people are realizing that the best companies are the ones who are most intentional about what they're trying to do with their people.
That's incredible. Do you think, I want to come to the audience with some questions in a second, but my last question is, the fact that you're from Seattle, your company's based here in this region, there's definitely been a focus. We have a very community-centric focus. I think we try to do business differently for the most part. Is this region feeding a lot of your ethic and ethos about how you do business?
I think for sure. I mean, I love spaces like this. It reminds me of where we started in the Bellevue Public Library. I think we have a lot.
Library?
That's correct.
That's
we
awesome.
did. The first few months were using the free Wi-Fi of the public sector. So thanks to our public sector allies, the state as well, one of our customers. But there's just so much energy here, and I think there's an authenticity here. It's not, we care about doing well by doing good, and I think it's not Wall Street, it's not Hollywood, it's Seattle. We help each other. We get the team thing. We work hard. And at the end of the day, we also say it's okay to go hiking and biking and get outside and be with nature and live a balanced, rich life. I think the Northwest can export that asset around the world. And the innovation that's come from here, you could just go down the line, Nordstrom, Starbucks, Amazon, Microsoft, and then a whole wave of, we hope Limeade and a bunch of other great companies, they have this ethos of keeping it real.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, the New Yorkers, like the East Coasters, like to denigrate us for being, off back home or skiing or hiking by 3 p.m. But it looks like you've actually been able to get clients from across the country who don't necessarily have a Pacific Northwest approach to life to say, yeah, we need to do this.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things going on. First of all, you've got the mega trend of health costs going up at the same time as employee engagement is going down. Some people treat those as two totally separate, unrelated things and either take a cost-only approach or a culture-only approach. Our view is that these things are totally inextricably connected concepts and that the same approach can solve them both. And companies across the country are embracing that. I think it started with healthcare and hospital systems and universities, but now every big company is seeing this is a real business strategy with a real return on investment as well.
So we're looking at the gold rush, and you guys are ahead of the curve in terms of being able to capitalize on it.
Okay.
Is that maybe being too optimistic, or do you think? I mean, you guys are really at the forefront.
Here's the world I live in.
Yeah.
Hanson.
All right, Henry.
We think of gold rush as a rush and a fad. Frankly, this is something that we've been doing a long time. We hope to continue to do it a long time. We're in it for the long haul. It's got a great sense of meaning and purpose behind it. And frankly, gold rushes sound kind of stressful. Like you have to get it all right now. And I think the startup and tech world has a little bit of that vibe where it's all about how fast can you make it to $1 billion. And we like to grow, but we like to grow because our customers are happy, we're serving them well, and we like getting those little feedbacks from people saying, I changed something, I improved something, I feel better now. To us, we like to think it's more sustainable but equally lucrative.
I feel better now for you having calibrated me that way. All right, I've got to pick up this microphone and take any questions you guys might have for Henry about his company, about well-being, or anything else. Yes. I'll get a hold of the microphone.
Yeah, thanks.
If you can stand up, actually,
I'd
so
love
we can
to stand.
catch the camera can catch you.
You talked about privacy and about wearables at 2 different points, and then the whole emerging trend of the Internet of Things. Those combine to create sort of a consumer privacy potential nightmare. Like, what kind of advice would you give to an individual consumer about how to protect their privacy as all these new trends roll out?
Well, first of all, read the privacy policies carefully. Sometimes employers are actually held to different standards than consumer companies are, so I think that can be a good regulatory help in some ways. HIPAA, GINA, COBRA, there's a whole bunch of legislation about keeping data privacy and not discriminating based on that. So one of the things we like to share with all the employees and people we serve is that we never share personally identifiable information, health information, with clients. And yet we have to administer incentives and rewards for these programs. So we can tell an employer who participated and who engaged and met these things, but we can't say exactly who's healthy or unhealthy, for example. And so it is a fine line. Frankly, it's a debate that's ongoing, and we're constantly, actually I'm probably more involved with the privacy in terms of use of our product than most employers have to be. But I think there's a good balance in this country of advocacy for privacy at the same time as saying, you know what, we can't do this without data. This is a data-driven problem. As an employer, I want to see the correlations between how many widgets I produce in an hour and how much preventive care or how the nutrition of that workforce was in aggregate. Because those are actionable decisions that I can make about how I structure physical environments. So I hope that answers your question. There's one more. And also, these programs, by the way, wellness programs, they are voluntary. They sometimes have rewards associated with them. And that's where people get to choose where they want to work and what they want to do at that work.
Yeah, thank you. I have 2 things I'm curious about very quickly. The first is, do you or have you thought about incorporating participation in arts and creative activities as part of employee total well-being? And then the second is, you've mentioned a lot of great statistics and research on productivity, and obviously your business model is for workers that already earn a lot and have quite a bit of free time. But do you see that same return on investment for companies in those tighter margin retail kind of industries in terms of how they can invest in their employees' health?
Those are 2 really great questions. You want to start with the arts one first?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I mean, to me, well-being is a self-defined thing in a lot of ways. So giving a workforce, giving an employee the autonomy to decide what makes them creative or innovative or fresh is something that we want explicitly to do. We want to help companies say, if someone needs a half an hour to do whatever it is that gets them energized, as long as it's not infringing on others, let them do that. You'll probably get an extra hour worth of productivity out of that. One of the great innovations we've done lately, we had an innovation to how we scale and deliver our service that was instigated by Natalie, one of our software engineers. And if you walked into the office, 1 time out of 10, you would see her doing puzzles. We have puzzles sitting out on tables. And perhaps as an engineer, that helps her get away from the problems she's solving. And sometimes the problems you're solving get solved while you're away from them. I think my best ideas happen in the shower. Some people's happen when they're walking. So giving people the license to do that, to me, is acknowledging that your company performance and their well-being are actually more connected than you might think. Regarding the second question about, how does a company in a thin margin business buy this? Frankly, I don't. Anyone who complains about cost of these programs is totally missing the point. I mean, our product costs about $30 a year per person. So what is that like? What do you spend on your company holiday party? I'm guessing we got Lane Powell here. Thank you. I'm guessing the lawyers are spending at least $150. So let's be cheap and say $150. So 5 times, and you get a couple drinks and you connect with your colleagues. Versus year-round having a reminder of what the company is all about. So to us, cost is not something that we think should ever be an issue. Health insurance costs about 300 times more than a program like ours. So
That question, I'd like to follow up on that because I'm wondering whether Limeade is very specific to white-collar industries. When you look at, say, companies like Google, where they get free lunch and all these perks to the folks who work in their offices because they want to recruit them, especially the developers, but then in the warehouses, they don't even pay for air conditioning. So is this what you're looking at extending to all facets of work life, including more manual jobs?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. A lot of the incentive for this type of program is to save money on health insurance. And frankly, it could be that companies like Google don't have to worry as much about that because of their profit margins and because they'll attract talent at all costs. So the bulk of our customers are not high-paid white-collar workforces at all. They are nursing populations, physicians, manufacturers, retailers. So the bulk of the employees we serve are not in high-margin industries. And in fact, the employers have looked at this from a hard dollar perspective and said, this is the most efficient way we can align our culture and potentially save on our health costs as well. So it's kind of a misnomer. Not that we wouldn't like to have the business of all those companies, but they weren't really the leading edge of this movement.
Thanks, Henry. By the way, I think our Christmas party was $27.95 per person.
Is there a decimal?
Yeah, it was under 30, but
Sizzler.
yeah. I'm curious what the take rates are in a successful program. So, yeah, how many folks opt in?
Yeah, there's so many ways to measure this. So there's some baseline things like how many people register, get in, and do their basic preventive care, complete an assessment, and maybe join one challenge. Yeah. You know, our target for that would be 80% of a workforce, and we've seen north of 80%. We have a Midwestern employer with about 45,000 employees that had 98% of their people in the front door and doing the basic things to get their incentives and kind of self-care activities that are really great. You know, as someone, my dad had a heart attack when he was in his 50s. He's still around, but you know, it's helpful for me to just do the basics and know that my cholesterol could be a little bit high. As a somewhat high-stress 46-year-old, that's good to know at this age. Then we have metrics for ongoing engagement, and we like to think about what's a meaningful action. So if I decide that I want to work on my weight, a meaningful action is I join a challenge that gets me learning more about nutrition, taking steps, eating a healthy breakfast, walking, or talking to my peers about it. So meaningful activities we would expect to be in the 30 to 60% range ongoing throughout the course of the year. Obviously, we want them as high as we can get, but that's realistic.
We've been talking about data privacy, and I think that we've talked about one side of it, which is, do I trust my company and the insurance company to do the right thing with this data they're collecting? But another side of it is, do I trust that they'll be able to maintain the security, right? We've had a lot of security breaches, et cetera, and I'm just wondering, it seems like your business really hinges on people having confidence that, people may have the best intentions, but we've had some huge data breaches. So how do you address, those issues around, will my information be compromised?
Well, I think anyone who's running a company of any kind should take this issue extremely seriously, and frankly, the good news is entrepreneurs have a trait that's really useful in dealing with this issue, which is called paranoia. So I think being super paranoid about data and having really great technical practices around that, not just around your data centers and how you house and store data, but around the process around storing data and who has access to it and how laptops are managed. And there's so much nuance just to that topic that you have to be really serious about. And it's not aspirational, and it's not exciting, and it's not about well-being, but it's really serious. So I would just say we invest very heavily in that.
Are you transparent about it as well? Do you actually make that obvious to clients and to their employees what you do with their data?
We do, and we explain that in our terms of service, in our privacy policy, and we also have some audits that we go through voluntarily. I don't remember all their names, but the SOC 2 audits related to security that really are our way of having third parties independently address how we treat privacy. The other thing that's missed in the whole privacy debate is the ultimate great beneficiary of this is the person. This is a personalized system. We were actually, I think, the first company to do some of the social things and devices, but also our well-being approach was fundamentally at its core personalized. And we ask people up front, what do you want to improve? And then when we create the personalized plan for everyone, what they want to improve is always in it. So this isn't a program that's being done to someone, it's being done for and with someone. And ideally, the things that they get to work on are things that they care about. Otherwise, you're really not affecting motivation. If you don't get to intrinsic motivation, you're not really changing behavior, you're just getting compliance.
Hi, I'm more interested in the components of culture that is beyond health, exercise, fitness, more around the area of what you talked about, gratitude. How do you show gratitude? How do you build more emotional connection with your employees? How do maybe leaders shows up differently in the way that they interact with the team? I'm curious to know what are the types of offerings Limeade have in that space, and what success have you seen? How do you track that? Because it's harder to track. I think some of these behavioral change from employees and leaders in the way that they interact with one another.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the big missing pieces in all of the health and wellness movement is connection to something more broad that's maybe even more strategic to the company. So we view that the middle management layer is actually one of the hardest to reach and one of the missing elements I think really gets to that. And so we have champion networks within companies who can offer local connection that a lot of corporations lose to that middle management layer. Those champion networks can offer challenges and promote things that might be well-being related or might just be work related. It might be just that you need to train your employees on a new skill. And that skill might actually be something like having a one-on-one discussion with someone that shows respect and that's listening and that has gratitude embedded in it. The best leaders over time develop a sense of humility and ability to listen that we can use our platform to challenge. So you might actually see over time that these two things are closely related, that the same skills that allow you to address stress, for example, like taking deep breaths and being mindful and seeing how your reaction is affecting the person you're talking to, that the well-being skills are actually super highly correlated with being a good manager, being a good listener, and affecting not just your insurance costs, but how you show up as a company to your workforce.
And you think some of that is actually quantifiable?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we measure things like resilience and stress and teamwork and commitment to the organization. What we found actually is that the two biggest drivers of employee engagement, true engagement meaning voluntary effort, going above and beyond for your workforce, are how you manage stress and how much purpose you feel in your job. We assess both of those. We have programs to help improve both of those. And we know that an engaged workforce sticks around longer, produces more, delivers better results.
Well, I'm going to close out this conversation with one final question for you. I had the good fortune of visiting your offices. It seems to me, I guess you're drinking your own limeade. That
is correct.
You guys do apply some of this to yourselves as well with the exercises. You also have 6 core values that you seem to take very seriously. It's on your website. It's on the wall in your office. Perhaps you can just tell us about how you're living what you're trying to get other people to buy.
Yeah, so our values infuse everything we do, from how we interview people, how we make hiring decisions, how we promote people, how we have one-on-one discussions, how we exit certain employees. And we use values as an alignment mechanism, and then we build our programs. For example, we have we're a team is one of our values, is going through our program right now. And so we infuse them in the actual delivery of our product. That challenge I showed you, we always are testing the things on our own employees that we want to roll out to the company.
What's one of those 6 values that might be startling or unusual or provocative to the rest of the world?
Oh, well, I'll give you 2. One that our employees love is speak plainly. I think having a sense of transparency about your data and how much cash you have on the bank and what are the challenges you face, it makes you human as a leader. You don't have to, I feel like I can show up and share whether I'm having a good day or not and be really authentic with the workforce. That resonates well.
You actually have screens in the office that show how you guys are doing with sales and targets and everything like that, right?
That's right. We have all of our financials are shared in a very transparent way with our company. We talk about our hiring rates and all that publicly within the company. My personal favorite is anything is possible, because companies like this didn't exist a while ago, and I think we have a bunch of really resilient people who don't really care that the world thought it was a dumb idea to do this. And we don't care what the haters want to say anymore either. You know, we're here to do what we're going to do, and we're not going to give up on it, and the sky's the limit.
Well, Henry Albrecht, CEO of Limeade, I hope this is possible because I think this is what the world needs as we move forward, and stress and all the other things that are compounding themselves in this new work world need to be alleviated in a really thoughtful way, and it seems to me that's what you're trying to do. So thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's
and thank you for joining us, and we'll be back over easy.